Hello, and welcome to the Healing Doesn't Have to Be Heavy podcast. I'm your host, Angie Barrett, and I am a trauma informed coach. I'm a play expert. I am a registered nurse, and I'm also a child abuse survivor. I help women use movement and play to connect to their bodies, releasing limiting self beliefs, stress, anxiety, tension, depression, and trauma. And as I was on my healing journey, I really struggled with feeling like everything was so heavy. It was so painful and it was such a struggle. And I felt so alone. And now that I'm where I am on my healing journey, I want to share the hope, the joy, the sparks of lightness along the way with other women who are on their healing journey from trauma, any kind of trauma. Now, I'm going to say, I think every single one of us has trauma. There's different types of trauma, there's different underlying causes of trauma. There can be big traumas, little traumas, life stressors, all of that. Our body responds the same way. And so, navigating through life and healing from life, from big events, from small events, all of that is and can be incredibly painful, can be incredibly lonely and isolating. So this podcast is a way to bring survivors, to bring glimmers of hope, to share stories, ideas, resources, tools, and ways that you, wherever you are in your healing journey, can find maybe a little bit of lightness, a little bit of hope, and some joy along the way. I'm going to tell you about my story, how I got into the work that I did. And just a disclaimer, I'm going to be talking about child abuse. I'm going to be talking about abusive relationships. So if you do get triggered, then definitely step away, take care of yourself, ground down, do some sort of activity to come back to yourself, to who you are. And then I invite you to come back because this podcast is going to have a lot of amazing resources, and I'm going to be sharing some of the ones that worked for me today. And so hopefully they can bring some hope, some joy, and some spark of maybe you get to find some joy along the way on your journey. So if you can, once you have taken care of yourself, step back because there's a lot of goodies in this podcast. So let me tell you about my story and how I got into the work that I did, because play and movement is a little bit unusual. So my abuse started when I was very young, and it went for many years, probably until I left for college. My abuse happened by friends of my parents, and it happened at church without my parents' knowledge. So I was dealing with not only the sexual abuse and the other types of abuse I was experiencing, but I was also dealing with the, in essence, neglect from my parents, because my parents had no idea that it was happening. These were people that they trusted, and so they would give me to their friends to take care of at church. And my abuse was also so significant that I had no memory of it. I blocked out all memories of it until about 10 years ago. I always knew that I had what I called this black hole of pain inside of me, but I never quite knew what was the cause of it until I hit rock bottom and the memories of my child abuse came out. So I went about my life. I grew up. I went to college. I became a registered nurse, and I got married very young at 21. And I ended up marrying an abusive partner. So often in life, until we heal our trauma, we tend to repeat the same patterns. And so I married an abusive partner, not physically abusive. And so he was emotionally and verbally abusive. And because it was better than what I had experienced growing up, I didn't realize what a toll it was taking on me. And by the time I ended up leaving my marriage, I was just a shell. I was kind of a shell to begin with, based on all the years of child abuse. I had no idea who I was. I had no idea what I thought or felt. And I had been gaslit for a number of years. I'd been told that I was the problem, that I was the reason that all of these things were happening. I experienced some religious trauma. I was told that this is what God wanted. And so I really kind of left my marriage not knowing who I was or where I fit into this world. So, like I said, I was able to go to college. I was lucky enough, I had that privilege, and I graduated as a registered nurse. And so I had been working as a nurse for many years. And it was interesting. Um, I also worked in environments in nursing that were high stress, high acuity, emergency departments, trauma, intensive care units, critical care patients, because for me, the chaos is where I felt comfortable. Like I said, I had that black hole of pain inside of me, and I never quite knew what was causing it. And so when things were calm, I felt very unsafe. I felt like I was on hyper alert, hyper awareness. And yet, when I was in the chaos of a trauma or in the ICU, I was able to separate from my feelings. I was able to dissociate, to do what needed to be done. And then I never really allowed myself to feel it. So I was surrounding myself with trauma in the work environment because I didn't feel safe when things were calm. Didn't realize that I was actually kind of perpetuating that cycle, not kind of, I was completely perpetuating that cycle of trauma. So I was experiencing it at home with my partner. I was experiencing it at work in high stressful environments. And so my body was just in this constant state of agitation and flux. And so then I would go through periods where I would just crash and I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't get off the couch. I would just totally check out of life, check out of everything. And so that's how I navigated that. When I finally left my marriage, I started on a journey to heal. And I still had no memory of my child abuse at that point. So I started working through this abusive marriage, realizing that what had been happening was not okay, was abusive. There was a lot of verbal and emotional abuse, gaslighting. And so I started on this journey to heal. I started opening up to the fact that maybe I wasn't the problem. And that was a really big shift and change for me. And that was really uncomfortable. And so I went about my life. I was still working as a nurse. And then about 10 years ago, so that would be about 7 years after I divorced my partner, I started dating someone new. And that person let me know that they were cheating on me through a Facebook post. And so after being with this person that I thought that I loved and who I thought loved me, they cheated on me and let me know in this very public way. And that betrayal by my partner unlocked the memories of my child abuse. And so I hit rock bottom. I started dealing with dueling traumas, these two major significant traumas that I was having to process at the same time. My partner cheating on me and memories of child abuse coming out. And so I just hit the lowest point. I hit my rock bottom. I was really struggling, and I ended up checking myself into an inpatient psychiatric unit that specialized in PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder because I was wanting to no longer be alive. It hurt so bad. And I realized that this black hole of pain that I'd been carrying for so many years, that I'd been doing everything I could to outrun, was really, in fact, the memories and the body memories of my child abuse. So once I checked into the inpatient unit, I really started to heal. That was what really started my journey. And as I was on that, it just felt like I was crawling at a snail's pace outside of this deep pit of despair. And I didn't see any light and I didn't see any hope. And it just felt like I had the weight of the world on my shoulders. And it felt so gross and so lonely. And yet I kept going. I found that internal strength because where I was so miserable. And I had people along the way, and yet I still just didn't feel like anybody really understood. And I didn't feel like anything was really connecting with me. In fact, it got so much, I couldn't take care of anyone else. I had to take a break from nursing. So I stepped back from my nursing career to take a little break. And I decided I needed something to do because just sitting at home wallowing in pity and despair was not going to be the most healthy for me. And I've practiced yoga for many years. I've done yoga, and generally my yoga practice has been hot and fast and hard. I needed really intensive yoga. Um, so the yoga studio that I practiced at was offering a yoga teacher training, and I thought, well, I need something to do. So I became a yoga instructor. And I loved it. That was a glimmer of hope for me because I started working with people to be in their bodies, to start to connect with them proactively or before things happened rather than reactively when they came into the hospital. And it just was a very different environment, and it started to open things up inside of me. Around the same time, it became really interesting. I could teach yoga and I loved it. I felt some joy in it, but I couldn't practice yoga. I couldn't be a student in any classes because the sensory information coming from my body was sending me into overwhelm. And every single class, I felt like I was ending up curled up in the fetal position in the back of the room. And I couldn't cry because I learned that I couldn't cry as a child while I was being hurt. And so I couldn't cry. So I would just curl up in the fetal position in the back of the yoga studio and do nothing. And so it just would put my system into overwhelm. And so I stopped becoming a student and going to yoga classes, but I could teach them. And then COVID hit. And how many people's stories have and then COVID hit? But for me, COVID actually changed things in a really positive way. It opened up things for me that I didn't know were possible. So a friend of mine who knew that I struggled with PTSD and was also a yoga instructor told me that she was taking a trauma-informed yoga training and asked if I wanted to take it with her. And I thought, great, yes, I want to learn about trauma-informed yoga. I clearly have trauma in my body. Maybe that'll help me be able to start to practice yoga again because I'm not able to do the mind-body practice that I'd done for so long. So I took this training, this trauma-informed yoga training, and it just changed my world. And a couple of things happened around the same time. So I was doing this trauma yoga training, and one of the modules and the lessons that we learned in my training is how powerful play and playful movement specifically are in helping us connect to a part of our nervous system that helps us to feel safe and connected and calm, and that's how we heal. And play was a really big part of helping tap into that part of our nervous system. And so I thought, that's interesting. And almost simultaneously, so around the same time, I was in therapy, intensive therapy. And my therapist started doing a protocol with me that is designed for people who experience trauma at such a young age that they have no idea of what safety means. So often on trauma healing journeys, people will say, well, think of a time where you felt safe. Well, I didn't know what that meant. My abuse started when I was so young. I had no frame of reference for what safety actually meant. And so this protocol is designed for people who experience trauma. And what it does is it helps to clear circuits or clear wiring in our brain. And I learned that all mammals, and by the way, humans are mammals, so all mammals, and humans included, are born with our brains pre-wired with 7 circuits. So meaning we come out knowing 7 things as infants. And one of those things, one of those circuits is play. And so if you think of how babies learn and how puppies learn and animals learn, it's playing. They learn how to play to navigate, or not learn, they play to learn how to navigate their environment, to learn what appropriate behavior is, how to live in their world. And it really does help the brain to process and to grow. And so I was learning how powerful play was in my therapy, and I was learning how powerful play is in my trauma yoga training. And so I thought I might as well try it because I've tried so many things on my journey. I have done energy healing, acupuncture, body work, mind body work, therapy, talk therapy, EMDR. I tried so many things, and I still felt like there was something missing. So I thought, well, let me try play and see if that works. And so I started to play. And that was really uncomfortable because as adults, we're taught, don't play, you have to be serious, or our play becomes competitive. And I wanted to just start to play like a child. And so I started pretending like I was an elephant. One of the negative beliefs that I grew up with based on my child abuse is that I had to be small because to be big meant that I got hurt. When I was seen, when I was big, that's when I got hurt. And so I learned I had to keep myself small. So by playing, I pretended like I was an elephant and I got to stomp around my house and be this big, magnificent creature, and I got to feel what it felt like being big without my brain going into overwhelm or shut down or danger, danger, danger. And it was just this huge transformative experience. And so I started exploring more and different ways of playing and different ways of doing things. And as I did, my body just started shedding trauma and shedding that stored black hole of pain in ways that nothing else had been able to let it go. And I was just amazed. So I started studying it and researching it. And a lot of the work that has been done and studied in movement and in play is done in animals and in children. And so I extrapolated that to me because I thought I have very much a wounded inner child. And so why not use these modalities that work for animals, work for children? I have the same nervous system as all of them. Why not see if it works? And so I learned that what play does is play allows us to separate from the mental story associated with the sensory information coming from our bodies. And it allows us to feel sensations in ways that feel safe and empowering. And I was blown away by that because feeling things in my body was so uncomfortable. It would put me curled up in the fetal position, numbed out. And yet here I was finding this way that I could actually feel into my body without shutting down. It was uncomfortable sometimes. And yet then when I would pretend to be a different animal or do something different, I would start to laugh and then that would shift my mood. I felt silly. I felt awkward. And I started to feel things. Now, I'm going to tell you, my abuse was so significant, I had no memory of it. Like I said, until about 10 years ago. And that means I'm a master at dissociating, at checking out from my body. So starting to build this mind-body connection, which is so important in healing and doing sensory or somatic work to start to experience sensations from the body is uncomfortable. And so play gave me this outlet for letting my body just feel things that felt the opposite of what I was feeling and allowed me to feel how I wanted to feel without going into overwhelm. Now I'm going to tell you. So I started doing this. I was like, this is amazing. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to go right to the deep stuff and let's get rid of it so that I can cut out all this healing journey and just get to where I want to go. And so I tried that. And I ended up curled up in the fetal position on the phone with my therapist, having to be talked out of a flashback because I went too deep. Anytime we start doing somatic or sensory work where we start to feel into our body, it is so important that we start to just dip our toe in and then come out because our body is protecting us because those sensations were so uncomfortable or are so uncomfortable that to feel them can put us into shutdown. So I learned early on, little and out is better, and to go slower until my mind and my body were able to connect and realize that I am safer. I am able to come out of it and to learn how to come out of that. And I needed my therapist for the first little while as I started to do that because that sensory or somatic work was still really, really painful and uncomfortable. And at the same time, it was fun. I was laughing. I was enjoying being in my body, something that I had never experienced before. And so I, after doing it for about 6 months, I told some friends of mine who had experienced regular life traumas, and I put that in air quotes for those of you that can't see. So people who hadn't experienced trauma to the degree that I had, but had their own stories. And so I started teaching them how to play and using playful movement. And it worked. And it was fantastic. And these friends of mine felt these huge shifts and really were able to also change their healing pathway. And so it's evolved. My coaching has evolved. And now I work with women to help them release their limiting self-beliefs, stress, anxiety, tension, depression, and trauma come into their bodies with play and with movement in order to find more peace, more joy, and lightness along the way. And so I always say that play and movement saved me, and it was one of the bright spots for me on my journey. Play and movement allowed me to release that stored energy. So often, as we are going about in life, our bodies cannot recognize, it's technically our brains can't recognize the difference between a threat. And so um, it recognizes something as a threat. And so, for those of us who have trauma, especially who have maybe repressed memories or things like that that we're not aware of, which, by the way, is all of us, then we go into fight or flight mode. It's like our bodies and our nervous systems are a car. And so, when we're in that hyper arousal, hyper vigilant state, or always in that fight or flight, it's like we're a car in neutral with our foot on the gas. We're just always gearing up. And so we don't ever get any rest. And that starts to deplete our body, wear us down. And play and movement were like putting gasoline in that car for me. It was giving me joy. It was giving me hope. It was giving me life while releasing my foot off that gas pedal of go, 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 go. It allowed me to start to shift that, to open up, to come out of that pedal to the metal all the time, but staying in neutral, and to just start to experience my body. So, one of the things I learned, which was fascinating to me, is our body is gathering information from all of our senses. So, our sight, our taste, our touch, our smell, sound, all of that. It's gathering information from our body and sending it to our brain at a rate of 11 million bits of information per second. So, that's 11 million bits of information that our body's picking up on that it's sending to our brain. Guess how much of that information our brain can process? Take a guess. Come up with a number in your head. 50 is the answer. And I don't know how researchers came up with that, but they did. So 50 bits of information is what our conscious brain can process versus 11 million bits of information. And so that's where a lot of this really big disconnect between our mind and our body comes in. Because our body's saying, oh my gosh, I'm sensing danger, danger, danger. But our brain can't really process or understand what it is that we're sensing. Maybe it's a smell, maybe it's a taste, or something feels the same way. You hear something, you smell it. I think I said that already. But so then that triggers us into a memory that's locked in our subconscious. And so all of us have memories and traumatic events locked in our subconscious. Our subconscious is formed by age 7 or 8 for most of us. And so you probably don't remember everything that happened before age 7 or 8. I definitely don't, but I'm also someone who didn't have a whole lot of memories of my childhood. But so those events that happen before age 7 or 8 are what form our subconscious. And with that, our subconscious is formed before we're really even able to process and to understand the world around us. And not only that, kids tend to be very self-centered. And so think of how many times you were told no as a child. Or think of maybe you were left in your crib crying. And while as your parent had good intentions, that may have felt to you like you were abandoned or neglected. And so, but you might not even realize it. And so out of this 11 million bits of information that's coming from our body to our brain, it taps into those subconscious hidden areas of memories that we are not even aware of that we have. And so that's where sometimes those unexplained feelings of anxiety or irritability, something's not quite right, all of that happens. What play does is it allows us to start to feel into those sensations, release that feeling, and start to bridge this mind-body connection and this mind-body gap. So I'm going to invite you to do a little exercise with me. I'm going to show you what I mean by that. So I'm going to invite you to start with a side-to-side sway. You can do this seated or you can do it standing, whatever works best for you. And just check in. Notice what's happening with your body, your shoulders, jaw, your belly or your gut, your toes. Now I'm going to invite you to go front to back and check in. Notice what happens with that direction. We all have one direction that feels soothing and one direction that feels uncomfortable. For me, front to back feels really uncomfortable. So stay in the direction that feels uncomfortable. So now start to check in. What's happening with your belly, your shoulders, your toes? For those of you that are not watching the video, I'm starting to lead with my head and my chin. It's not a flow. So now I'm going to invite you to go back to the direction that feels soothing. Now check in. What happens with your shoulders, your jaw, your toes, all those same things. So movement gives us an opportunity to understand and to connect our mind and body and start to realize what our body's saying to us so that we can start to recognize signs and symptoms earlier on. Now go the direction that feels uncomfortable. That gives you information about what it feels like in your body when you're starting to go into stress or tension or anxiety. I feel my shoulders creeping up to my ears, my toes are gripping into the ground, and come back to the direction that feels more soothing. Now I'm going to invite you to shake it out. Shake out your arms, shake out your legs. This is called a somatic shake or a discharge of energy. It's a way to release the buildup of whatever just came up for you. And so if you're just starting to find this mind-body connection, that may have been really uncomfortable for you. If you're further along on your somatic journey, then it may still have been uncomfortable for you. Going the direction that feels front to back for me, that feels uncomfortable, still brings up some tension. And then when you shake it out, you get to release it or let it go. Now, here's where play comes in. This is where play is super powerful. I'm going to invite you to imagine that you're a tree. So plant your feet down into the earth, into the ground. Maybe see if you can find all 5 toes pressing into the ground. Lengthen up through your spine and imagine that you're a tree swaying in the wind. And let your body start to sway, imagining that you're this tree, not worrying about what direction you go, but finding your feet grounding into the earth. Maybe if you're seated, pressing your sitting bones or those 2 bony spots that you're sitting on into the chair. Maybe wiggle your fingers as if they're leaves blowing in the wind. And start to notice. Try going the direction that feels more uncomfortable for you. As you pretend and play to be a tree, how does that change and shift your ability to go the direction that feels uncomfortable? It probably still is going to feel uncomfortable, absolutely. But how does that change it? For me, it makes it much easier to go that front to back because my brain isn't so consciously aware of what's happening in my body. And so then shake it out again. Shake out your arms, shake out your legs. That's how play can help us to find some lightness, some relief, some joy along the way. It allows us to feel those sensations, to process them and to let go or to move on or to find something else to help bridge this gap between our mind and our bodies so that they're not fighting each other anymore. They're working more together. And so we're not having all those unexplained times of anxiety or stress or trauma. It's releasing this energy. And the beautiful thing is you get to go as big or as not big as your body wants. Sometimes maybe you just want to let your fingers go like they're leaves. You don't want to do your whole spine. Totally fine. You're in control. And so play became this amazing outlet for me. And so now what I want to do is I want to share the hope, the joy, and the sparkle of light along the way. And maybe it's not play. Maybe play feels uncomfortable for you. But with this podcast, I want to bring, and am bringing in so many amazing resources and tools, things that you get to try and you can choose to use in your healing journey. I've got amazing guests that are coming on, sharing their stories, incredible resources. And I am also letting survivors share their story. One of the things for me is that I felt so alone. I felt like nobody could understand what it was that I was going through. And yet, now that I am speaking more publicly about what happened to me, I'm finding that more and more people actually really do understand the feelings that I experienced. They may not have experienced the same trauma, but they understand those feelings and that pit of despair or overwhelm. And so, finding community in healing is another way that healing doesn't have to be so heavy. So, in conclusion, I am going to be asking all of my guests two questions. And so I'm going to ask myself those same questions. If I could look back and wave a magic wand over my healing journey, what's one thing that I would change, if anything? And I would love to say, I would love to find play earlier, play and movement, because that really was such a big turning point on my journey for me. And at the same time, I don't know if I found it any earlier, would I have been ready for it? I feel like I needed to go through what I went through in order to be open and able to receive and understand how truly powerful play and movement was. And so the second question I'm going to ask all my guests is, if we could sit down and talk in 12 months, where would you want your healing journey to be that it's not now? And my answer to that is, I would like my healing journey to be bigger, to be louder, to be more bold, to be speaking out more about healing doesn't have to be so heavy, because it was so isolating for me. I don't want other women to have to go through the loneliness and the despair and the absolute just pit of grossness that I felt as I was on my journey. And so I want to be more big, more loud, and also reverse that negative belief that I was taught that I had to be small, because I don't have to be. I get to be as big and as loud and as vibrant as I want. So I'm so excited to have you on this journey with me. I can't wait for you to hear the incredible guests that we have coming up, to reach out. Let me know if you have any questions. Find hope and sparks of joy on your healing journey. And with that, I want to give you a free gift to help you start to work on the somatic or the sensory, the play in your body. So I'm dropping a link in the show notes for my free, short, less than 5-minute movement sequence that, when you're feeling stressed and feeling overwhelmed and anxious, for instant calm. It's a great way to find that connection with your mind and body, release trauma, release anxiety, and start to really build that bridge in ways that feel fun and hopefully don't put your system into overwhelm. So if you have any questions, if you want to reach out to me, my contact info is down in the show notes as well. The best way is at my website, angieberrettmovement.com. And I spell my last name Berrett. So angieberrettmovement.com. It's got all my socials on there. It's got my email. You can get in touch with me. So if you have any questions, definitely reach out. Let me know. Try the movement sequence. And then I'll see you on the journey, hoping and sending you healing, light, and not so heavy vibes. Catch you next time.